Hi, I'm Daphne Backman. I am the creator and the editor-in-chief of icedancecom since 1999.
How did you start icedancecom?
Well, Emma Abraham and I decided at one point that we were tired of going through the internet trying to find results for different things or technical reference information. We had a whole list of bookmarks on Internet Explorer or Netscape, I think it was then. And we also were hosting some official websites for dance teams, and they were on sites like Zoom or GeoCities or very cheap hosting. And so we decided to combine forces and build a hub that would showcase technical reference information as well as be the host for this website. And also we started doing profiles of dance teams. We really just both were very passionate about ice dance. We realized that there wasn't a hub like that out there. So we decided, let's start it and see where it goes. We bought our domain name in June of 1999, and by the 19th, the website was online. Very small, but it was online. And that was really my first foray into the world of actual web hosting, where you paid for the domain and you paid for the hosting and how the whole thing connected and worked together, and was also back in the land of HTML and basic web design before I even used a program like Dreamweaver to put anything together. So it was a very basic website, and we just took all of the information that we compiled and put it together. It took a little bit of time to really get the site going, but we were really excited when it was first featured on what used to be, and I'm not sure if it's still online now, but SkateWeb used to have all these lists of websites and things. So we were really excited, and yeah, it just really built from there, but it was really a basic site with links to different things and some photos, but it wasn't, it definitely wasn't what it has grown to today.
Do you follow all of the disciplines as closely as dance? And if not, what specifically drew you into that field to say, wow, I want to create like the most comprehensive database you're going to find on this discipline?
Well, I do love watching the other disciplines. I don't always get to watch them when they're happening, but I always go back and watch the competitions after, because I'm very passionate about skating as a whole. And the time that it takes me to work on icedancecom doesn't always allow me the time to be able to watch everything live. I do enjoy the other disciplines as well. And one of the other things that I work on is a site called Figure Skaters Online, and I am kind of their tech person to help them with working in the web hosting and the different components of that. And so I've been working on that as well. So it keeps me tied into that because I love skating as a whole. So ice dance is just really the thing I'm most passionate about. And that happened very, I have always watched figure skating since I was a little kid. And in 1996, I watched Angelika Krylova and Oleg Ovsyannikov of Russia and fell in love with ice dance.
Wow.
And so from that point on, my love of ice dance continued to grow until I met Emma through a figure skating message board. And we just realized we both were really into dance and wanted to do something that would, we felt a lot of the coverage and a lot of the discussion was around singles. But we felt too that there were a lot of fans that were passionate like us, and we wanted to create a place that they could come to for information and they'd know that we would have it available. So we really wanted to do that.
Do you have any skating history yourself, or is it something you've just always watched and enjoyed?
I skated on frozen ponds. I live in Maine, and I'm a native Mainer. And I always skated as a kid with my brother and sister up until I was about 14. There was no jumping involved. It was just basically how fast can you get around the rink on figure skates. And by the rink, I mean a flat piece of ice in a field. My mom was a passionate figure skating fan, and so I watched skating with her as a kid, and it was just so much fun. I remember watching the Olympics and just having that time with her to watch it. It was just a great memory that I have as a kid, and I don't think she probably realized that I would start doing what I'm doing now with regard to skating. Since then, I have tried to skate a couple of times, and I've realized that I'm going to leave that to the skaters.
I feel the same way.
Photos.
I feel the same. I understand. So you said icedancecom started basically as a bunch of links. It was more of a resource to get to other places. What you've expanded it into now is really almost like a rule book for ice dance in a sense. All of the dances, there's the patterns, you have everything you can imagine is on this site. So when was the decision that you could expand it into this? When you first started this site, was that what you envisioned? Or did you get it up and then all of a sudden say, well, you know what, I can slowly add all of this and make it to what it is?
Well, Emma and I, our first focus was let's get it online. And then over time, certain things just organically grew into it. We started a partner search piece. And then we added what we don't do it anymore, but we had a service called Recycle Bin where parents or coaches or teams could list costumes that they had for sale. I had no idea that the site was going to grow into what it has today. I always just took it year by year and promised myself that if the time came where I wasn't excited about it anymore, that I would decide it's time to step away and let someone else continue. But anytime I've even felt close to not being passionate, because there have been times, there's always something that happens to draw me back into it. And I just really love the sport. I think it was 2003, I went to the Lake Placid Ice Dance Championships for the first time. Before that, IDC, which is what we call icedancecom, had really been just a site about more European or Russian type of ice dance. There was just more of that focus. That's where our passion was at first. And it was about that time that Emma decided that she was going to step away. Emma Abraham, created the site with me. And so I was kind of on my own, but I did have some great friends around at the time that just encouraged me and said, you could do more with the site. And so little by little, I went to Lake Placid. I still go to the competition today. I've been going since 2003. And so we started adding photography. We started adding reports, and it was just little stuff at first. And then in 2006, I picked up a camera for the first time. And that was the end of my recapping. I now take a lot of the photos that we have. It just continued to grow almost faster than I could really handle doing it on my own. But I was very lucky that Melanie Haney came. I met her in 2007. She has become basically the assistant editor-in-chief for IDC, and we have a great team of photographers that organically has grown. So it's been very helpful. Now we have people contributing photos, contributing articles, and it's really been, I've been able to manage it much better than in the beginning. It's been a very crazy ride at times, but it's so enjoyable because I've met so many amazing people out of it.
How many events do you get to attend a year now? What is a typical schedule like in the figure skating season?
This year I did Lake Placid Ice Dance Championships, which is the end of July. I also did Skate Canada, and I'm going to Nationals. And those are the three that I'm doing this year. I usually will do 3 to 4, depending on the location of the events. If there's something closer to me in New England, I try to go. but I'm not always able to. It really, I have a day job, and so I'm not always able to get to everything that I want to. Next year, I already have a list of 4 events that I want to go to, one of which is Montreal Worlds in March of 2020. So it really depends on how much time off I can get from work and what the event is.
We've been following skating about the same amount of time, so you've watched US ice dance grow to a massive level in the last 10 years. And even 20 years ago, if a team was finishing 7th, that was an accomplishment. 10 years ago, you had Bellman and Augusto starting to really push into the top. Now you have 7 or 8 teams that could be in the top 10 at Worlds. What is it like seeing this transformation, and why do you think it is? Do you think that the new judging system, well, it's not new anymore, but the judging system they use now versus 6.0 gives more opportunity, or do you think that the U.S. really just started to focus on ice dance as somewhere that they needed to develop, and now we're seeing the results of that?
I think it's a very long process. I think it started with coaches like Igor Spielbaum staying in the U.S., also Natalia Linacek, Dubova, Angelika Krylova, even after that time. These coaches taking the time and teaching the Russian technique to some of the students. And over time, you can see that, Punslin as well started something where finishing 7th was great. And then furthering on, Lang and Chernyshev moving things forward again and continuing to give the dancers in the U.S. someone to look up to. And then Tanith and Ben really breaking through and getting that world medal was a huge accomplishment. I always knew that U.S. ice dance could be great, but actually watching it happen was just an amazing feeling because I've been watching it for so long and going to nationals and seeing these teams, and the work that goes into it. And so it's wonderful to see the accomplishments start to happen. I remember Marilyn Charlie finishing, I think it was 7th at their first Worlds, and it was like, wow, that doesn't usually happen. Usually you have to finish 12th. Okay, this is breaking things a little bit. I think Tessa and Scott were just a spot ahead of them at that Worlds too. In addition to the U.S., it's also North America as a whole has really stepped their feet forward in ice dance, and it's been amazing to see. Fast forward to 2010, and you have Marilyn Charlie, Davison White, and Tessa Virtue and Scott Moyer take the top 2 spots on the podium at the 2010 Olympics. That would never have happened in that last decade. It really took these small steps. Then you move to 2014, and we have, Marilyn Charlie finishing first, Tessa and Scott finishing second. Again, this is a whirlwind, continuing going forward. And then what we saw with Tessa and Scott coming back and winning the gold in Pyeongchang, it's a continuation of that momentum that continues to be built. I think the judging system is rewarding skating skills more than what it had. I think it seems at times less subjective, even though there's still that component in there that feels like it's a little subjective still. But now one thing I wanted to point out too is now some of the Russian coaches are returning to Russia, like Angelika Krylova is returning to Russia, and we're starting to see this resurgence on with those teams there. So it's interesting. It will be interesting to watch that trajectory and see if it goes in a similar way to what we saw in the U.S.
You mentioned earlier that Krylova and Ovsyannikov, before they were even really serious contenders for a gold medal, they were what drew you into the sport. Obviously, you like the Russian, you like the European style. Why do you think that is? Was it because the U.S. really wasn't at the level of the rest of those teams creatively and technically? Or was there just something about the traditional ice dancing style that you saw with those teams?
I think I really liked their style in particular. I don't think, for me, it wasn't looking at, was it a Russian style, was it American style? It was really just looking at, they were tall, and their appearance on the ice just drew, their programs drew me in 97 with Masquerade Waltz. I felt like they were telling a story. And again, it wasn't on TV as much. Dance has never really been on television that much. And so I saw them and was drawn to them. Then the TV started picking up, and we started to see more and more after, which was wonderful. But I really was drawn into them, that team in particular, not necessarily because of the style. But I do tend to favor, I think, sometimes that style of dance. But for me, it wasn't in particular like where it came from. It was just more or less, I really liked what they did with it. I thought it was really special.
We should note, we're very fortunate now. Even the smallest competitions have live streams, or they have videos of every skater. Back in the mid-90s, when the Grand Prix was just starting, they would really just briefly kind of show the events. Sometimes they would just show clips of the skates, not even the full skates. So skating has come a long way. And even at the World Championships, at least in the United States, you're lucky if you see the top 6. With the single skaters, maybe a little bit more than that. But, I mean, ice dance was never a sport where you got to know the lower teams of the top 10 unless you really watched some of the early season events and maybe they placed well, and then you get the opportunity to see them. So it's a completely different game 20 years later than it was.
Yeah, do you remember actually having to refresh I believe wasn't a video feed, but it was more like a screenshot feed, and
yeah,
you had to keep refreshing it?
There was a German Grand Prix, and if you wanted to know what was going on, like every 20 seconds they would have one screenshot of what was going on.
And you're lucky if it was in focus.
Yeah, exactly.
That I remember those good old days. We are very spoiled now to have so much video streaming online, especially because it's just not on TV. Singles, it does still continue to get a lot of attention, but dance has really come so far in the quality of skating and what it's able to offer the viewer. The technical ability, everything has just gone up so much that I really wish that more people had the opportunity to watch, because it's getting better and better. The teams are getting better and better. And I think it's definitely a discipline that needs more attention from viewers. But I still remember that, and I've been told so many times, remember, everyone's looking, Michelle Kwan and even Dorothy Hamill, all of those, that's what draws in so many of the viewers. So that's what, I think they focus on.
Why do you think the USFS hasn't really taken advantage of pushing dance to be something like ladies single skating? Because you look at the results from the last 12 years, dance has been the strongest event for the US. And then we go back to these Grand Prix recaps that they have, even on NBC now. They don't even focus on dance, typically. I mean, if an American team wins, they might show their skate, but it's very quick, and they're still more concerned with the ladies who, fighting for the top 10 really now. And you have dancers that, could potentially all finish in the top 4 or 5. So why do you think USFS hasn't really grabbed onto that and made something bigger of it? Is ice dancing just something that's too hard for most people to relate to, you think?
Well, I think ice dance has always been like a little train that continues to chug along and chug uphill. I think we're very lucky that we have developmental coaches that have worked with these teams at such a young level. The group that I see at juvenile, intermediate, and novice, and even some of junior, started training at a very young age with coaches who really instilled those strong skating skills. And we've been very lucky that we have that. Just like Madison Hubble, Evan Bates trained with Yuri Chesnachenko and Yasin Nacheva in Ann Arbor, those skating skills are part of what's making these teams so strong now. And that training and the focus on it. And I'm not sure, I don't think it's that USFS isn't paying attention to it. I think that they're just really just continuing to focus on what drives the sport. And for now, they're judging by the changes that are going to be in the qualification system, they're really looking to try to make skating overall strong in the U.S. And because dance has been so almost organic, I think that there just hasn't been as much focus on pushing that out in the forefront as far as TV. Really, the coaches and the kids and the parents have really pushed the sport forward.
Do you have an all-time favorite team? Is it Krylova-Ovsyannikov?
Well, they're the team that got me into ice dance. It's really hard for me to pick one team in particular because I've learned to enjoy so much about every team, whether they finish first or last, in the middle. They all bring something really special to the table. I was really lucky in '99, not long after icedancecom launched, to get to go and watch a training session for Krylova-Ovsyannikov. In watching that, I really got a new respect for the work that goes into a program. It was almost like a jolt to, oh my God, this is what it is. It's not all what we see on TV with the beautiful costumes and the makeup. There's so much more that goes into it, so much more work. And in doing that, it just changed the way that I look at skating and skaters as a whole, because I see them more, as people doing their jobs and working hard, whether they're kids or adults. They're really pushing forward with a passion that they have, and I appreciate all of it. I know in some cases people will be quick to point out, well, that team in last place, they're not very good. There's something special about them. It could be their story, it could be something that they do on the ice. There's just something special that all of these kids bring to the table, and not everyone is in the sport to finish first. There are different stories that are being told all the time, and so now I have a different take on things, and I have respect for the kids and the coaches for the work that they do, and the parents too, because they're the ones getting up in the morning, driving their kids to the rink, and changing their schedule and making sacrifices, because skating is a very, very expensive sport, and it's a lot of work to get to the highest level in the U.S. or internationally. So I don't really have a favorite. It's more of Angelica and Oleg really got me focused on ice dance and began the passion that I have for it. But I really admire all of the kids who go out there and do things. So, and as a media person who runs a website focused on promoting ice dance, I try to be as objective as possible.
And I think Zach Donahue, when he interviewed with us, he said, skating's a full-time job. People don't realize there's nobody that's going to go out there and not give their 100% effort. The cost of it, the amount of time you have to put into it, the amount of time you maybe miss out in other things of life because you're dedicated to this. So it's true, people even in the last places, they're trying just as hard. They might not be as talented. They might have a bad day. You don't know. But there's something good in everybody.
I just think there's so much to be excited about. And remember, these teams that are now at the top, they were not always at the top. They started somewhere. They had their years where they didn't finish as well as they have hoped to, or they had performances that were not their best. You have to just be open-minded, and if you don't take the time, you may miss out on something special. And so this year, in fact, for nationals, I'm getting in just before the juvenile dance starts because I'm going to be there for the whole thing.
Let's talk a little bit about this year specifically. There's several rule changes within ice dance. The way, of course, the GOE is now -5 to +5. That's consistent across all the disciplines. It gives the judges a little bit more room to say this is a really excellent element versus this is a very good element. What do you think about the way the GOE is being scored right now? Because the levels don't necessarily correspond to the GOE that we're seeing For example, maybe a team misses a little detail that might knock their level down, but they're still receiving really high GOE, so it's kind of balancing them out with other teams. What do you think about that, and is that going to lead into a problem?
There are definitely a lot of changes this year to get used to across the board in all the disciplines. The tech panel especially has been critical of teams across the board. I don't believe many teams have achieved all their key points, at least completely.
McNamara Carpenter Skate America is it. That is it.
Yeah, it's been very tough, which leads me to believe the judges are holding the skaters, even though they have this new +5, -5 GOE. I feel like the judges are really holding teams to a higher standard to achieve these key points, because we're talking about some of the top teams in the world that are not achieving the key points, which is tied to the level. And the +5, -5 GOE, I think there's a lot of potential for it to really separate the teams more. I just don't think it's happened yet. I've noticed at some competitions that the judges have been more critical and taken more points off. And other competitions, they haven't been quite as, stingy with the points. So there have been some instances, though, that we've noticed, myself and Ann Calder, who writes for icedancecom, we have noticed some instances where judges have, if you look at the protocol, you will see a clear pattern of everyone is on board except maybe one judge, and it's kind of out of whack. So we're actually going to be doing a piece on that later this season, because it sticks out like a sore thumb. You're trying to figure out, okay, why did that judge go completely, what were they watching? Because it just doesn't tie in. And there have been more instances than what you would think. As we continue to go on, we're just keeping track of those. The one thing that I think has caused a lot of, it's actually increased the creativity, is the new choreographic elements. While they're only worth 1.10, the GOE that can make the difference. I was rewatching a couple of performances today, and I think one of the best instances of use of the choreographic slide, Lila Fear, Lewis Gibson, in their disco free dance.
Agreed.
I think that may be the element that for the choreographic slide that's received the most points, including the base plus the GOE. It's a great use of that element. Also, Panama Buchan with their choreographic twizzle at the end. It just fits with the program right at the end. And I think that's what the judges or the tech panel, when they were building out these rule changes, I think that's what they were meaning. This is what we want you to do. We want to see these types of things. There are other really great instances, but we really need to see more of it, I think. And I think teams are really starting to catch on to, okay, we can get X number of points if we just do this. Let's make this smoothly go into our program so it doesn't look like we're throwing this in to get points. Oh, no, it's part of the whole performance. And I think that makes a difference.
I was actually going to ask about choreographic elements. Every single dance team that we've talked to so far say their favorite elements are these choreographic elements, which is brand new for this season. Like you said, they start just over a point, but with GOE they could get, I think, close to 5 points, somewhere between 4.5 to 5 points. It's 15 points a program. It's a lot of opportunity there to really catch up. And we saw Fear and Gibson in NHK. This is a team that has not qualified for the free dance at Worlds. They nearly won the free dance at NHK, coming from 7th place in the rhythm dance, which is basically unheard of. But a big part of that is because they've figured out a way in the free dance to get everything perfectly in sync with the character and the music that they have. And like you said, their choreographic slide at the end is amazing, and I think it's probably everybody's favorite of the year. Moving forward, I think I hope personally that all three elements stay in the programs. Do you think that they could expand on that though and make even more room for creativeness? Maybe say, well, you have a list of things that you could potentially do, so we don't start seeing the same dance spin, the same lifts. Do you think they can expand it and say be even more creative moving forward?
I think that they can. I think they could bump up the base. I also think they could bump up the base value. I do think that they can expand it. That I think that in watching teams this season, the teams that have successfully done it, there's so much room for more that if they watch those performances and watch those elements, it can lead to additional points being available and also encourage more creativity. Because I think these choreographic elements, I think that it's really about creativity. I don't think it's about, can you do another quick lift or half, twizzles. They already know you can do the twizzles. They've seen it. It's a separate element. They know you can do a spin. But giving them this 1 second, it's almost like a chance to show your personality. That just split second, here's your personality. And more, if it ties in with the music, it's even better because it just flows so nicely. And the 2 points that I brought up really were just 2 off the top of my head. I rewatched a couple of performances. I know that the French team of L'Oreal and Legac have a lovely sliding movement as well. But those are just a couple of examples of the successful ones that I've seen that I can remember.
And you mentioned Panama Buchan. I'm a big fan of them this season. They actually, for many years, were doing the twizzles as shoot the duck position, basically. They've turned that into their choreographic twizzle at the very end of the program. He kind of continues onto a sit spin that's almost as good as any single skater in the world. I think that's also the two examples you gave are absolutely perfect. I think that they really nailed it as well. The end of their program is amazing, the choreography.
Yeah, and they also, Stepanov and Buchan had issues sometimes getting, with their twizzles, when they were doing shoot the duck in the actual twizzle element, they would run into sometimes having scoring issues. And I think by putting it at the end, putting it into the choreographic twizzle was genius. Because now they can still do it, and they can still get points.
And they don't have to worry about the level.
And they don't.
Yeah.
Exactly. They don't have to worry about it earlier in the program.
One other change this year is that the twizzles that they do by themselves, aside from the choreographic twizzles, and there's a 1 foot step sequence that they have to do. Those are judged, by the technical panel, they're judged individually. So if one skater completely wipes out, the other skater might nail it and get a level 4, and then you still get some points for the element, as opposed to where previously it's as a cohesive, whatever the team does. What do you think about that change?
Well, I think there are 2 schools of thought on that. One school is if you are going to score a team as a team, if one member falls, we need to ding them as a team. There's also another school of thought that is if one person falls, you should get some credit for what they did. Did you if the other partner finishes the element? I actually can see both sides, but I think I actually prefer them getting graded separately because I think that it is good for them to achieve some points for the component that they did do. I've also seen teams that will go through and bobble on one of the twizzles and then they'll lose levels, like everyone loses a level. So this is giving an opportunity for them to not be completely knocked out. They'll get some points. I mean, it won't be as high as what they wanted, but yeah.
And they can get completely knocked out in these patterns where one wrong edge knocks them down a level, 2 wrong edges, basically disaster for the whole pattern. And you have this complex set of steps, and they're really just looking at really 4 segments of that. So I guess it balances out there, and I agree. I think that it's not the same way as pair skating is judged, but these are 2 separate technical committees that are making ideas, so they don't really go hand in hand. Pairs, if a skater does a double, the other does a triple, they get credit for a double. Ice dance, they went this different direction, and you are still earning some points for what you did, and I think that's something that is positive for the skaters.
Agree. And I like anything that will bring something in that's positive for them. So they're the ones that are working so hard, and they do deserve to get credit for what they're doing. So I'm happy to see those split out if that's going to be what happens. And so far, it seems to be what's going to happen. Again, the technical panel has been very, very critical in a lot of the elements this season and really dinging teams, lowering the GOE, and the teams are getting, they're losing those points, so they're not able to achieve what they normally would have. So I think it's been a learning experience, not only for the skaters, but those of us who watch it, because there's just a lot to pay attention to.
There is, yeah, a missed blade grab or something really simple can knock you down a level. It's not the obvious errors that we see in the other disciplines that say, okay, well, they're going to lose points here. So you really have to keep up with the rules, and I think that the ISU is in a good place. I think that the ideas that they've brought in this year across the board are some good ideas. I think one of the issues remains that the judges are not seeing the levels that are assigned to these elements, so they might not necessarily pick up on these little errors, and then the GOEs might not correspond. But then again, you have this idea that if they are seeing the levels, they might see, okay, this team got a level 1, this must be in the negatives. And that's not really what the point of it is. So I see where there has to be a kind of that fine line that we're going through. But I think it's tremendously advanced itself, and I think that across the board, even in singles and pair skating, the IJS is getting there. I think we're about as...
I think it is. I think they're still working out bugs. One thing I thought that the ISU did this season that was really helpful is they published a couple of videos that help explain the positive features and negative features that go along with elements, and why they would get a +5 and why they would get a -5 and everywhere in between. And for me particularly, and some of the members of my team, we found that extremely helpful. And now when we're watching a performance, we're noticing these little things. Was that a smooth exit? Did that come down a little clunky? Those types of things, because then they will lose points. It also helps us when we look at the protocol to say, hey, wait a minute, that didn't... Sometimes we don't always agree, because we'll look and say, boy, they missed it because that was not... They should not have probably gotten that +4 because of this particular issue. So that has been extremely helpful, and they seem to be embracing media, the social media, so much more.
I think they're finally in the 21st century this year.
They are. It's great. It's great to see it. Now, if everyone would broadcast the press conferences like Finland did, we'd be all set, because that was such a nice surprise and so helpful. In writing our recaps, we don't always have quotes, so we were able to get quotes from the competition. So it really helped be able to put our article out there with information coming directly from the athletes, from the press conferences.
And if you guys have not seen what she's talking about, the ISU over the summer, after they made these changes, individually, the pairs and singles committee and then the ice dance committee put out videos, and they showed what the positive and negative features are, and they showed specific examples of what would be a +3, what would be a -3, what would be this level, what would be this level. And the ice dance one especially is really well done. It was very clear. There's always going to be those kind of questionable, was that a +2 or +3? But for in general, I think that spending an hour and a half, however long the video is, you really learn a lot from it, and it really helps. So if you haven't seen it, you should check it out.
Yeah, it definitely helped us. It helped me. I start to understand things even more, because in running IDC, there's just so many little things that go along with it. And so keeping up on top of the rule changes is not always as easy as I'd like it to be, but those videos really helped me be able to understand what I'm watching. And still now they'll continue to come out with adjustments and release new information. And in reading that now, because I've seen the video, it all makes so much more sense.
So moving forward with this season, we have the Grand Prix final. How do you think this is going to shape out?
With Habit and Cicero not competing in 2 Grand Prix and thus not making the final, it has really opened the door for other teams to step through and really shine. Um, I think based on the judging that has gone on this season, it appears to me, that Hubble and Donahue will have a fight for the podium with Stepanova and Buchan. Both teams have put out really great performances. Hubble and Donahue have been off for a few weeks, and judging by the changes they made in a very short time for Skate America and Skate Canada, I'm willing to bet that they're going to come to Vancouver very prepared. So I could not tell you who will end up on top, but I think on paper it looks very likely that those teams will be in contention for the top spot. The others, however, that bronze medal position is really open. Sinitsina and Kasalapov of Russia have skated some great performances this season, really have great speed and a good connection with each other. I see them fighting for it. But you can't count out a team like Italy's Guignard and Fabri, because they have been in the shadow of Capellini and Lenotte for many seasons, and now this is their first season to shine. I feel like both of their programs are really a step up for them, and they appear like they've come to fight. So they definitely could play in the mix. The interesting thing out of all of this, there's a bunch of new teams making it to the final for the first time, which is amazing. I think this whole Grand Prix season has been so exciting. I know that without some of those top teams at these competitions, it may have appeared like the rosters were depleted without their participation. However, the opportunity that it's given to other teams to debut and skate in this environment is going to pay off dividends later, because they're getting the valuable experience they need to be able to take their skating to the next level.
I think that's a great point. You see the pairs Grand Prix field. Pairs this season has been really wiped out. A lot of the top teams are either injured, not skating, retired, whatever. You see weak events on the Grand Prix, but with ice dance, again, a lot of teams have either retired or they're out due to injury, and it's given a lot of teams to step in, win medals, and it's not like the quality has really gone down. A lot of teams have really, really stepped it up. And one of the teams that I think has really stepped it up is Guignard Fabri of Italy. They've really taken their skating to a new level. And I think in the Grand Prix final, they might even be in contention to possibly win a medal. And we would have never thought that at the end of last season.
I feel like without having Capellini and Lena, without having them in the mix this year, I feel like the ceiling's been raised for them. I feel like they have stepped it up programmatically, performance-wise, all of it. It's like they have come out, they're not skating like Italy's number 2. They are skating like we are the best in our country, and they're putting it out there like that. And I think that makes a huge difference, because there's always talk of inter-country hierarchy, and this country's number 1, and this country's number 2, and this team is number 3 in this country. It can get really, I think, upsetting for teams. We saw a huge change last year in the U.S. when Hubble and Donahue won the national title. It was not really expected. They always had the capability of achieving that, but it was not at that time expected, and that was a huge surprise. And for me, it was showing me that the status quo and the pecking order really seems to have been thrown out the window in some cases. And I like that, because I think it's exciting for fans. I think it's exciting for the teams. I think that it brings there's just so much more momentum heading into competitions. I look at a piece of paper. I used to be able to look at a piece of paper with a list of teams and say, okay, these teams will be in this position, and this will probably be like this. it had nothing to do with what I knew their capabilities were. It's just what I thought would probably happen. And I don't have that luxury anymore. It's very much the teams are so close that if one makes a mistake, that's it. If you look at Gillis and Poirier, who skated at Skate Canada, they made a mistake in the rhythm dance that took them out of the final group. We just didn't. I don't feel we saw that.
That's one thing. Again, we're going way back to 6.0, but there were world championship events where the top 15 throughout, there were 4 segments back then. Throughout all 4 segments, did not switch positions. Even if a team made a mistake, even if a team fell, they'd still be in that same position. Now I feel like ice dance has caught up to the other disciplines where if you don't have a good day, you're not going to be held up to the spot that they think you should be in. And that's one of the really exciting things. I think, again, it goes back to what you said. You can come in as USA's number 3, but realistically, all of these teams, like we said, could be top 5 in the world. So a bad day or a good day for one of them might boost them up to the top. You never know. And I think that's one thing that's made ice dancing really, really exciting with IJS. I think that's one of the great things that we've seen, that the room for movement is there.
Yeah, and also making those mistakes has become, like, for me, I was in the audience at Skate Canada when Gillis and Poirier had the mistake. To me, it was just another, like, nail sending a message: don't make mistakes. Do your best every time. Don't trip, don't stumble, don't fall, don't. Because they're really going to take points off. And I think there have been some questionable instances throughout the season where that hasn't happened. But for the most part, I feel like the message is you need to put out your best performance. Try not to make any mistakes because the points will be taken away. I feel like it's not necessarily the pluses, the plus 5s, but the minuses can really, really make a huge difference too. So there's a lot of components now. It's almost like you need to have an Excel spreadsheet with the elements and the base values. I mean, it can be, if you're a diehard fan, that's how it feels. Because you want to make sure that what you're watching and the score at the end matches up to what you think the performance was.
And at NHK, even Zagorski Guerrero made a mistake on the twizzles, and that element alone, that mistake, is what took them out of the gold medal position. Just that one element, and that dropped them down even far enough that they were 4th in the free dance. So lots of movement, lots of excitement. I think that, and again, this year there are so many teams that are kind of on an even playing field that it really just depends on who's the best on the day, and that's how it should be. It shouldn't be, this is the team that should be the strongest, so let's give them the gold medal. And I think the rest of the season.
I think the teams deserve it. I think they need to know when they go out there and put out their best that they're in contention because they didn't leave the points on the table. And I think overall, at the end of the day, that really means a lot.
Is there anything with the rule changes or that hasn't happened yet that you think should happen with the rules, or maybe opening up to more choreographic kind of elements or more freedom in choosing their elements? Is there something specifically that you would like to see in ice dancing that should be changed?
I really love the choreographic elements. I think that's my favorite of the changes. In the rhythm dance, I think trying to marry the rhythm and the pattern together, it's not a perfect science. And I'd like to see probably more synthesis across tech panels, because judges see things differently than the tech panel sometimes, and teams are all aiming for level 4, but the calling can be different from event to event. So I'd like to see more synthesis with that. That's my major thing. But I do like the choreographic elements, and I would like to see them find a way to expand it. Maybe they add it to the rhythm dance. Maybe they tweak the rhythm dance. I mean, a lot of changes have happened since 2010, which I believe was the last time we had compulsory dances. Yep. And then we moved to the short dance. Now we're into the rhythm dance. And so I'm kind of on the edge of my seat wondering what's going to be the next thing. You know, what's the next change?
I'll tell you what the next thing is. We have to suffer through Broadway as the theme next year, and I can't wait to see what some of these teams come up with. That is what the next thing is.
I actually have a friend who produces shows here, local shows, and I've already talked to her and said, okay, I need you to tell me what are some great ideas that some of the teams may not think of, so that I can kind of share those ideas, so that we don't have 15 Chicagos or what's another, Phantom of the Opera is another one we could get. I go through this list in my head thinking, oh dear, it could be so much fun, or it could be like watching compulsory dances for some people with the same music playing and the same. I want to see some excitement and originality with it, so I'm hoping that the coaches are already kind of thinking, oh yeah, we might want to be thinking about that music for next year. Or maybe I'm wrong and they don't have any idea and they're hoping it will go away. But I'm pretty sure that's what they're going to do, and that it's going to be Broadway. So if you like Broadway shows.
Yeah, we'll see. I have a feeling it's going to be 50-50. I think 50% of them are going to resort to the pieces that we know really well and we've seen 1,000 times, and I think 50% are really going to kind of step outside that box. We see it even this year. Some of the tangos that we see are not really tangos, but they get away with it because of the beat. We see cell block tango, which Born and Kratz used once upon a time, and now we see it all over Ice Dance. It is a tango, but it could be used next year technically.
It really could be, and that's why it's top of mind. Thinking, okay, we just saw this year. It fits the tango. Oh my goodness, we could see it next year for someone else.
There's a Ukrainian team too that's skating to Broadway this year. They could just keep the program next year, and I mean,
yeah, exactly
within the rules. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how this theme goes. Final question: is there any way you think, as obviously someone that is passionate about ice dance, is there any way, besides the videos that the ISU has come up with, for spectators to understand the sport more than they do? This is the one discipline where people really don't know the rules as well as they might know in singles and pairs. They don't understand why maybe this is this level. Is there anything that the ISU can do? Is there anything that social media can do to really say, hey, this is going to be the end-all tutorial to make you understand?
Well, I think there's a bunch of different thoughts to that. When Ice Dance is on TV, I think one of the positives we have is the commentators that are reviewing things. Tanith White and Ben Augusto are two that come to mind. They bring a wealth of experience, and they have a way of explaining what's happening on the ice and breaking it down for the person who's viewing it so they can more easily understand what's happening. I think that's definitely a plus and something that needs to continue. I think having it on television more would help, bringing it more mainstream. A friend of mine actually said to me that on Dancing with the Stars, when they watch it, they love it even though they don't know the difference in music. And so I think if you look at it that way, it's kind of like saying, well, you don't have to understand everything, but you do need to understand what's going wrong, like what to look for when going wrong. So why not at the start of the broadcast, if it's on television, have a little chart saying you're looking for this, pick a couple of things. I understand it's harder in the rhythm dance because those technical pieces are mostly tied to most of its key points and a pattern. So that's really hard to understand. It's still hard for me to understand sometimes. But if there were some things that could break down, you're going to look for twizzles, which is on one foot. You're going to look for these, pick a couple of things. They do it in single skating sometimes, and I think it would be helpful. And a lot of people are visual learners, so in seeing it, they'll definitely get it. And those are just a couple of things that I think could help. I think on social media, the more attention that dance gets, and the more we break down different pieces of programs so that they can understand it, the better. There's a huge fan base that's online. And there is an equally huge fan base that isn't online. And so I think we have to look at what we can affect. You can affect the folks that are online. Being an online website, especially icedancecom, we try to do what we can by making the reference materials available. Recently, I've been going back through the list of everything that we have and thinking, what can I do from season to season to point out this information and break it down in a way that makes sense? Sometimes I'll have a former competitor actually write a breakdown of some of the pieces and each of the key points. But I'm not sure that's enough. I think there has to be more that we can do, either individually or collectively, to get the information out there so people understand it. Like I said, there's a huge fan base out there. But you have to find out where they are. Are they on Twitter? Are they on Facebook? Instagram? You have to figure out where they are and then cater it to them so that they understand everything and get answers to their questions. And I always encourage people, if you have a question, they can always contact me and I'll try to get an answer for them.
One of the ideas I had, and I don't know if this would realistically work, but you see the USFS during nationals, they have a kind of separate score tracker from what the ISU uses. I think they could expand that, and especially for ice dance, for every single element that they have that the dancers are performing, they could show the criteria, and then maybe the technical panel.
Oh, that's a great idea.
Well, maybe the technical panel could, like, all three of them could quickly click on the features that they believe were achieved, and then we could see which ones had the majority, and that's why it's getting that level. I think, I don't know if there's enough time for the technical panel to really look down and say, okay, out of these 5 features, but realistically they should know what these features are, and they should know immediately what they have and what they don't, and then we could see, okay, this one's highlighted because at least 2 of them said they had this one's highlighted, and now you have 6 features, this is a level 3 or whatever, and I think seeing that, it might take up a lot of the screen, or it might take up too much of the screen, I don't know. Or maybe they could do an interactive feature where you could follow along on NBC or something on their website. But I think that would be something that could help people learn. And then if there were discrepancies, people could discuss, well, they said on this element that this didn't have a smooth exit, or this element, they said they weren't close enough together. And that's where we could really get discussions rather than, I didn't like this team, I didn't like this music. We could really go in and discuss kind of the intricacies of why the scores are what they are. That would be my idea. I mean, I don't know if it would work. I don't know if they have the time to do that, but it would be...
I think that's a great idea. And I know that they have these headphones that people can wear, and listen to what's going on in the arena. Like, they have specific people. I'm not sure if they're still doing it. But I'm a visual learner, so I process things differently than someone who's an audio learner. And I know, here's an example. There are some television shows that when you're watching, you can have your computer or iPad open for an enhanced fan experience. That is a perfect place for that.
Yeah.
Perfect place for it.
The USFS, during last nationals, they actually had where you could go to the NBC Olympics website, I think it was, but they had live scoring. Every single element that was put in, they showed what the score was. They showed if the jump was under review, maybe it was under rotated or downgraded. With ice dance, I mean, a lot of these codes, people don't really necessarily know what they are, but I think that if you took it a step further and you gave, okay, these are the 6 criteria that must be established, and then you say, okay, they did this, they did this, they did this, and they start to light up green or whatever, then I think people will say, okay, that's exactly why they got this. That's why they didn't get this.
I think that's a great idea. And I really think that people don't have to know everything all at once. They can learn little by little. When I started watching ice dance, I didn't understand very much of it. I was very clear on jumps, and when those are obvious, like, mistakes. If a pair didn't land a throw, if all of that. In dance, it was just more subjective. It seemed to be more subjective to watch, and this would give them just the beginning, just these small nuggets. You don't have to overwhelm them at first, but these small nuggets would really go a long way to educating people. And the ones who are really interested in dance and start to see all these components, that may fuel even more interest. That, oh, I didn't know the dance was so involved and intricate. And there still are those comparisons to pairs. Well, dance is the one where we don't lift above the head and we don't jump.
And we don't,
so
and we don't do our lifts over 7 seconds. Or Barbara Fusipoli will tell you that, but it was over.
Exactly. I think she has a stopwatch.
Every single time she sits there and she times every single lift.
Yep. She's ready to go to bat for her teams if she needs to.
She is.
Thanks for watching. Enjoy the rest of the season, Grand Prix final, Worlds, Nationals, etc. Bye, guys.